December 7th, 1941. 06, 15 hours. 10. Irrenchu feet above Oahu, Hawaii. The engines of Lieutenant Commander Mitsuo Fuchida's Nakajima B-5N Kate hum with a steady, confident rhythm as the Hawaiian coastline slides into view beneath the morning haze. Below him, Pearl Harbor sleeps, battleships moored in neat rows, anti-aircraft guns silent, sailors just beginning their day. In Fuchida's cockpit, the smell of oil and salt air mixes with something else. Certainty. Fuchida is no ordinary pilot. He is one of the Imperial Japanese Navy's elite, hand-picked, rigorously trained, forged in a system that discards the weak without hesitation. He has logged thousands of flight hours. He has practiced torpedo runs until the sea itself feels predictable. And as he raises his binoculars and surveys the harbor, he does not feel fear. He feels superiority across the Pacific. Japanese naval aviators have long regarded American pilots with thinly veiled contempt. The U.S. Navy, they believe, is soft, its training diluted by safety regulations, its pilots rotated home instead of hardened by relentless combat. Japanese doctrine demands perfection before combat. Only the best are allowed into the cockpit of a carrier aircraft. To Fuchida and men like him, war is an art mastered through discipline and sacrifice. The Americans, they assume, are amateurs at 07:49. Fuchida keys his microphone. Tora, Tora, Tora. The signal crackles through the airwaves. Surprise achieved. Moments later, the sky erupts. Torpedoes slash into Battleship Row. Bombs tumble from the clouds. American aircraft burn on the ground. Wings shorn off before they ever leave the runway. Japanese pilots weave through flak bursts with practiced ease. Their formations tight. Their strikes precise. It is everything they were trained for. And it works. In Tokyo, admirals nod grimly as reports arrive. The American Pacific Fleet has been crippled. Japan's elite aviators have proven their worth. And yet, buried beneath the triumph, a dangerous assumption hardens into doctrine. This war will be won by quality over quantity. June 4th, 1942. Dawn. 240 miles northwest of Midway Atoll. The flight deck of the carrier Akagi trembles as aircraft are armed and rearmed in frantic succession. Lieutenant Joichi Tominaga, a seasoned attack leader, waits in his cockpit, sweat pooling beneath his helmet despite the cool morning air. Something is wrong. Reports are confused. American carriers, thought to be far away, are suddenly everywhere. Above the task force, the sky fills with contrails. American dive bombers scream down from the sun. In less than 6 minutes, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu are transformed into burning wrecks. Veteran pilots, men with years of experience, instructors who once molded the next generation, are killed in their ready rooms, trapped below decks, or lost with their aircraft in the sea. By the end of the day, 4 Japanese carriers are gone. More devastating still, so are hundreds of irreplaceable aviators. The Imperial Navy has lost not just ships, but the very core of its air power. What the Japanese High Command struggles to grasp in the months that follow is not the material loss. It is the systemic one. Their training pipeline is narrow by design. Becoming a carrier pilot takes years, and only a fraction survive the process. There is no reserve, no rotation, no plan for mass replacement. Across the ocean, the Americans respond differently. At Naval Air Station Pensacola, the skies are crowded with training aircraft. Young ensigns learn the basics, then are pushed forward, not toward perfection, but toward adequacy. The U.S. Navy accepts something Japan never will. Combat itself is the final instructor. Pilots are rushed to squadrons, blooded in battle, then rotated home to train the next wave, bringing with them hard-earned experience. By late 1942, as the brutal air war over Guadalcanal grinds on, this difference begins to show. Japanese veterans fly mission after mission from Rabaul, exhaustion etched into their faces. They still outclass many American pilots individually, but each loss cuts deeper than the last. When a Zero spirals into the jungle or vanishes into the sea, there is no one equally skilled to replace its pilot. Meanwhile, American squadrons absorb losses and keep coming. A downed pilot is replaced within weeks. A squadron mauled in combat is reinforced, retrained, and sent back stronger. Experience spreads outward instead of disappearing. By early 1943, the men who once laughed at American training standards are beginning to sense the shift. Over the Solomon Islands, Japanese pilots find themselves facing enemies who do not break, who learn fast, and who return again and again, backed by an industrial and training system that seems endless. The sky, once Japan's greatest advantage, is no longer theirs alone. April 18th, 1943, 08, 45 hours, over Bougainville, Solomon Islands. The tropical air shakes violently as Lieutenant Rex T. Barber's P-38. Lightning tears through scattered clouds at treetop height. Twin Allison engines scream in unison, the vibration rattling through the long boom fuselages. Barber's eyes flick between his instruments and the sky ahead. He knows exactly who he's hunting. Somewhere above, flying low and fast, is Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, architect of Pearl Harbor, escorted by veteran Japanese fighters. The Americans have done their homework. Radio intercepts, precise fuel calculations, a razor-thin margin for error. This is not improvisation. It is a system at work, one refined by months of hard lessons and relentless training. When Barber finally spots the enemy formation, the moment is electric. The sky erupts into chaos, tracer fire slicing through humid air. Aircraft twisting violently as pilots strain against G-forces. Yamamoto's bomber takes hits, begins to trail smoke, and plunges into the jungle below. The kill sends shockwaves through both sides of the Pacific War, but it is only a symptom of something far larger. By 1943, Japanese pilots are fighting a war they can no longer sustain. At Rabaul, once the Imperial Navy's crown jewel in the South Pacific, veteran aviators brief in dimly lit huts. Maps stained with sweat and grime. The faces around the table are familiar. Too familiar. The same men fly every mission. There are fewer replacements now, and those that do arrive are different. You can see it immediately. New pilots hesitate during takeoff. Their landings are rough. They ask questions veterans never needed to ask. They have perhaps 300 flight hours, sometimes less, and almost no carrier experience. Where once Japanese training demanded absolute mastery before combat, desperation has forced shortcuts. The veterans notice, they don't say it aloud, but they feel it in formation spacing, in missed signals, in the way newcomers cling too close during dogfights. Across the sky, the Americans notice too. Over Henderson Field, Guadalcanal, Marine and Navy squadrons cycle through at a relentless pace. Pilots arrive green, fly missions, survive, or don't. And those who do are rotated out after tours of duty. They return to stateside training commands carrying something invaluable, recent combat knowledge. They teach how Japanese pilots turn left instinctively, how Zeros bleed speed in dives, how discipline breaks when formations are pressured from above and behind. This information spreads like wildfire through American squadrons. The Japanese, by contrast, lose knowledge every time a veteran fails to return. August 1943. 22.0 feet over the Solomon Sea, Lieutenant Saburo Sakai, one of Japan's most famous aces, peers through the scratched canopy of his Mitsubishi A6M-0. He has survived wounds that would have grounded most men. He has fought since China. But now, something feels different. The Americans don't scatter anymore. A formation of F-6F Hellcats approaches, larger, faster, bristling with 6.50 caliber machine guns. They attack in disciplined pairs, diving through the Japanese formation, extending away, then climbing back for another pass. No turning dogfights, no reckless pursuit. Sakai realizes, with cold clarity, that these are not amateurs. These pilots know exactly what they are doing. The Zero, once supreme in maneuverability, now feels fragile. One mistake means death. One hit can tear the aircraft apart. Worse still, Sakai can see that the Americans flying these machines are confident. They trust their aircraft and the men flying beside them. That confidence is new, and it is terrifying. By late 1943, the balance has decisively shifted. American factories pour out aircraft faster than Japan can replace pilots. Hellcats, Corsairs, Avengers, each iteration tougher, faster, deadlier. But the true strength lies not just in steel, but in systems. Pilots are no longer precious relics to be preserved at all costs. They are trained, tested, rotated, and returned, forming an expanding pool of experience that compounds with every battle. Japanese leadership understands the problem, but too late. Attempts to expand training come as fuel shortages worsen. Instructors are pulled from the front, weakening combat units further. Carrier decks lie empty, not for lack of planes, but for lack of men capable of flying them into battle. And the veterans know the truth. They are being ground down, not by inferior pilots, but by an enemy that learns faster than it bleeds. As 1944 approaches, the skies over the Pacific are no longer a proving ground for Japan's elite. They are a killing field, where experience is no longer rare, but mass-produced, and the men who once dismissed American training standards now face an opponent that seems inexhaustible. June 19th, 1944. Suriname, 12 hours. Philippine Sea. The horizon shimmers beneath a merciless sun as Lieutenant Junior Grade Alexander Vratsiu grips the controls of his F-6F Hellcat. Sweat trickles down his spine inside the cramped cockpit, but his hands are steady. Ahead, black dots multiply against the pale blue sky. Japanese aircraft, climbing hard from their carriers. This is it. The radios crackle with calm. Practiced voices. Bearings are called. Altitudes confirmed. Fighter directors aboard American carriers. Vector squadrons with mathematical precision. Every man in the air knows his role. The Japanese formations rise unevenly. Some aircraft lag behind. Others climb too steeply. Bleeding speed. The spacing is off. Vratsiu sees it instantly, not as an advantage to be exploited, but as an expectation. When the two forces collide, it is not a battle. It is a slaughter. Hellcats plunge from altitude in disciplined sections, firing controlled bursts before climbing away. Zeros attempt to turn, instinctively, desperately, but the Americans refuse to follow. They zoom upward, reform, and strike again. Japanese pilots die without ever seeing their attackers. Vratsiu downs 6 aircraft in 8 minutes. Below, the sea begins to fill with wreckage and bodies. The Americans will later call it the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. The name sounds flippant, almost cruel, but in the moment, there is nothing humorous about it. For the Imperial Japanese Navy, it is the final confirmation of what veterans have feared for over a year. The system is broken. Japanese pilots enter combat with minimal flight hours, poor gunnery training, and almost no experience in formation fighting. Fuel shortages have reduced practice time to a fraction of what earlier aviators enjoyed. Carrier landings, once drilled until instinctive, are now attempted by men who have barely touched a moving deck. Losses are catastrophic. Of the hundreds of aircraft launched, only a fraction return. Many ditch at sea. Others miss their carriers entirely and are lost to exhaustion or navigation errors. The carriers themselves, Taiho, Shokaku, fall to American submarines, taking what remains of Japan's trained aircrew with them. What Japan cannot replace now is not metal, but memory. On the American side, the machinery grinds forward with chilling efficiency. Pilots who survive the Philippine Sea are rotated home within months. They step off transports in California, Florida, and Texas. Not as recruits, but as instructors, they bring first-hand knowledge of Japanese tactics, radar-controlled interceptions, high-altitude attacks, and coordinated strikes. Training syllabi are rewritten almost in real time. New pilots learn not just how to fly, but how to survive. They study gun camera footage. They memorize engagement rules born from recent battles. They understand that victory comes not from individual brilliance, but from systemic pressure. By contrast, Japanese squadrons receive replacements who have never fired their guns in anger. Veterans like Saburo Sakai watch as young pilots climb into zeros with quiet resignation. They give what advice they can, but there is no time. The next mission is already forming. October 24th, 1944, Battle of Leyte Gulf, Sibuyan Sea. Anti-aircraft fire pounds the sky as American carrier aircraft descend in waves. Lieutenant Yukio Seki leads a small group of attackers toward the enemy fleet. His aircraft is laden with explosives. He has been told this is the only way left. Kamikaze. It is not fanaticism that drives him. It is arithmetic. Japan no longer has the trained pilots to fight a conventional air war. Experience cannot be rebuilt quickly enough. The enemy's squadrons regenerate faster than they can be destroyed. For men like Seki, the sky has become a one-way road. By the end of 1944, Japanese veterans are ghosts in their own air force. The few who remain are exhausted, flying obsolete aircraft against overwhelming odds. The Americans, once derided as poorly trained, now dominate the air with relentless confidence. The irony is cruel. Japan began the war with some of the finest aviators in the world, men who dismissed their enemy's training as inferior. But it was the American system, not individual brilliance, that proved decisive. As 1945 approaches, the outcome is no longer in doubt. The sky belongs to those who can endure loss, adapt, and return, again and again. March 18th, 1945, Ito 6, 40 hours, Western Pacific, east of Okinawa. The flight deck of the USS Essex roars to life as dawn breaks over the steel-gray sea. Deck crews scatter like clockwork mechanisms given human form. Yellow shirts guiding aircraft, blue shirts securing ordnance, green shirts adjusting control surfaces. The smell of aviation fuel hangs thick in the air. Lieutenant James Jimmy Flatley, Jr. climbs into his F-6F Hellcat, checks his harness, and gives a brief nod to the deck chief. He has done this dozens of times before. Around him, every pilot some are on their first combat mission. Others are nearing the end of their tour. All of them have been trained by men who have already fought this war. The catapult fires. Flatley's Hellcat lunges forward, vanishing into the sky. For Japan, Okinawa is the last defensive ring before the home islands. For the Americans, it is another test of endurance, one they are built to pass. Japanese airfields on Kyushu and Formosa send up everything they have left. Some aircraft are piloted by veterans, their faces gaunt, eyes hollow. Most are flown by boys with barely enough hours to solo. Many aircraft carry bombs instead of fuel for the return journey. American radar picks them up long before they arrive. Fighter direction officers calmly assign intercepts. Squadrons launch in waves. Pilots climb, form up, and wait. When the Japanese appear, they are met not by a desperate defense, but by layers. Hellcats slash through first. Corsairs follow. Fresh fighters replace those low on fuel. Damaged aircraft peel away and are guided home by radio. The cycle repeats without pause. From the Japanese cockpit, it feels endless. Shoot down one American fighter, and another replaces it. Force one squadron to disengage, and a second appears above. There is no break, no thinning of the enemy line. This is not bravery versus bravery. It is a machine versus exhaustion. On Okinawa, U.S. Marines and soldiers look up to see contrails crisscrossing the sky, visible proof of air supremacy. Supply convoys arrive almost unmolested. Bombers operate with impunity. Every ground operation is backed by air power that never seems to run out. Japanese commanders know the truth. They have pilots willing to die, but not enough trained to fight. In underground briefing rooms, orders are issued that would have been unthinkable in 1941. Minimal training, one-way missions, sacrifice in place of skill. The sky, once dominated by mastery, is now surrendered through desperation. Veterans who once scoffed at American training standards now understand what defeated them. It was not individual pilots. It was replacement. April 7th, 1945. Over the East China Sea. As American fighters orbit overhead, the Japanese battleship Yamato steams toward its final mission. There is no air cover. The pilots who might have protected her are gone, lost years earlier over Midway, Guadalcanal, and the Philippine Sea. American aircraft descend in wave after wave. The largest battleship ever built sinks beneath the sea, her guns silent, her sky empty. By war's end, the Imperial Japanese Navy's air arm is shattered beyond recovery. The elite aviators of 1941 are dead or grounded. The training system that produced them, brilliant but brittle, has collapsed under the weight of sustained attrition. The United States emerges with something entirely different. A generation of pilots forged not just by combat, but by continuity, experience preserved, multiplied, and passed on. A doctrine that accepts loss, absorbs it, and returns stronger. The Japanese pilots who once dismissed American training standards never faced a single enemy squadron. They faced endless veteran squadrons, and the sky was never the same.